What's up troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and today we're looking at the official Battlefield 5 multiplayer reveal trailer, and I'm going to roll through this bad boy scene by scene with you guys. We're going to look at everything that's available in the game. We're going to be looking at some of the more important minor details, such as, you know, the gunplay, the mechanics that appear to be improved, the immersion factors, and some other stuff, as well as breaking down some minor details which could point towards very big things for Battlefield 5. Now, everything you're seeing in this trailer is from the Grand Operations game mode, and it appears to feature on the first day of the game mode, which is Airborne mode, which is pretty damn sweet. This is 64 players, it's going to be intense as hell, and we're just going to roll on in. But one thing, they have indeed announced Battlefield 5 Royale mode. There is no footage of this, no real information of this, but they did quickly announce the Battlefield 5 Battle Royale is going to be a thing, and it's going to feature team play mechanics amongst other things, but they didn't really specify a lot. So let's dive on into this. Now, we have the opening sequence here, and I'm just going to roll this back quickly, because I feel like we have our first look at some customization elements in the game, which is pretty damn cool. We have some more airborne style mechanics up here. We have goggles and headsets, and we even have some kind of sort of bandolier ammunition belt as another option available too. We're even seeing some face paint options. It looks like these guys have all taken a quick trip to Madden, but I'm sure there'll be plenty available. We've seen some as well in the reveal trailer. And these guys all seem to be wearing different kind of camo loadouts. This dude here is wearing something that's a bit more flak tarn-like in the middle. This guy here is something that's a bit more patchwork. It features some more Arctic elements. And the lady on the left over here is featuring effectively a long trench winter coat. So it looks like customization is going to be very damn impressive. And it looks like there's a lot of depth to it as well. Now, another thing I want to mention here quickly is that the dudes doing this animation of the red light, green light are most likely the first instances of AI bots featuring in Battlefield. Now, there is no reason that in this airborne mode, the opening animation sequence would feature any kind of multiplayers, sort of element players doing these animations. These are probably all going to be AI that are ferrying troops out of it, out of the plane into the parachuting sequence. And it's really interesting because by the looks of things in the next sequence over, there are a crap ton of parachutes here, and not all of those can be filled by 32 players. It would be very hard to emulate a sort of D-Day style parachuting landing or any kind of invasion airborne landing with simply 32 players. So it would appear that AI could indeed be featuring in Battlefield 5, which I'm personally quite excited for. Now, another thing I quickly want to mention here in this opening sequence is that we are seeing planes going down again, and lots of bullet tracers, so there probably is going to be some kind of tactical advantage to downing some of these planes as they power drop troopers in, whether that be the position the troopers are spawning in, so you know where they're going to be deploying, or potentially slowing down the respawn rate of these paratroopers and getting some early kills in. Interestingly, later on in the trailer, there are players moving flak cannons into reinforced positions, so it looked like the combination of flak cannons and paratroopers will be a tactical advantage and something to look out for in airborne mode. Now, this is something I think is pretty sweet. I just want to open with, we got our first look at the sort of aerial perspective of some of the air transport planes going in, which I think was pretty damn cool. But we also have a night and snow map. You know, the two things that the Battlefield community loves the most has been slammed together all in one. And that is a wonderful thing, ladies and gentlemen. And even later on in the trailer, it does appear that it does indeed become a day map, so that could potentially point to transitional weather or potentially transitional day and night cycles, or it could indeed be two separate instances of the same map. But that's definitely something to look out for. We also have a player up front here with a reflex sight. I'm not entirely sure of the weapon. I do believe it is a Sten, but I might indeed be wrong. But this is indeed a sort of red dot style reticle reflex sight, which did actually exist in World War II. A lot of people thought when Call of Duty World War II added them to the game that it was some bullshit. But this is actually historically something which was around during World War II, which I think is pretty cool to see. And we also have some immersion elements coming up as well. Now, in the open sequence here, you're seeing some more immersive elements that they've added to the gameplay. The dude in front of us is stumbling in the snow, which is a character animation to sort of add to the overall effect and vibe of the battlefield, which I think is really damn sweet. We've also got what appears to be some kind of reconnaissance player who looks like they're hooded up. It looks like they've got some kind of like either hat, jacket combo or hood to look super damn badass. It's something that looks really cool. And we also have a radio. This is a communications radio, which was typically used to call in and receive intel during World War II. And we're also seeing the instances of sliding mechanics back in Battlefield 5, which is of course something that features of Battlefield 1. You can see the left foot appears to go forward here, and they slide into the snow. Also leaving footsteps behind as well, which is pretty sweet. And we have an STG-44. Now, something I think is really cool as well is that fires appear to be a new part of destruction. We're seeing them more or less all over the map. There's fire practically everywhere here, and it seems to have a destructive element in the game. It doesn't seem to be just for show, and potentially we could be seeing fire as a new way of destroying wooden houses, because most of these houses over here are wood, as you'll see later in the trailer. And you never know, the game might even feature a flamethrower, which would be pretty sweet. Now, something I want to roll through here is not only is the destruction elements of this outstanding, quite frankly, this is probably the most destruction we've seen in a Battlefield game in years, since the Bad Company 2 days, since the Battlefield 1 days. These entire wooden buildings are being absolutely ripped apart by this vehicular tank. Interestingly, like I mentioned, all of these buildings are wood. The tank itself is featuring some of the new camouflage options, which does include the additions of foliage, if that's something you want to add to your vehicles. This is a customization option that is available in-game. And something I really do want to point out as well is that with all of these wooden structures, which seem to feature quite heavily in this opening sequence here, higher caliber weapons such as light machine guns and sniper rifles will indeed have a bullet penetration system that will allow them to actually damage players through the wood. So coverage in terms of Battlefield 5 is looking pretty damn low. Another thing I want to mention as well, as an unconfirmed potential mechanic here, is that this player, as he dives to the ground, interestingly appears to be almost leaning. Now, we know that like explosive shocks are going to be a thing. We also know that sliding is going to be a thing. But interestingly, as he looks up at the tank, it almost appears as though as he's on his back, he is leaning to the left. That is not a dead center setup. And I would like to believe that with, you know, the ability to lay down on your back, we might even get a Rainbow Six Siege style leaning system in the game where players can lean around corners and potentially lean whilst laying down, which would be pretty damn sweet to see. So, over here we have our first instance of the new Fortification Building, which is some basic sandbags, and we also have the return of the hammer tool, which is pretty sweet. This is an engineer style thing. I don't know whether this is going to be for the support class, the engineer, or potentially the squad leader, but in effect it looks like everybody in the squad can actually build these reinforcements, but only certain squad members can actually place them down in the first place. Interestingly as well, we have some of the more Axis-based setups and customization options available here, as these guys are all geared up. We've got the MG42 being mounted on top of the sandbags here, but we have an Arctic-style camo in the back here with face masks and a full-blown sort of camouflaged helmet, which looks badass as hell. You can see that uniform is going all the way through. We've got this character here who's all blacked out. We have this character here who's got sort of steampunk-style goggles, as well as featuring a sort of German hat, which is something that, you know, it's a pretty typical thing that we've seen in World War II films and games and stuff. You know, the old-school sort of, I was going to say snapback, but it's not quite a snapback. And this seems to carry on all the way through. But, you know, it's interesting to see some more polar opposite customization options. We saw earlier that the Allied forces featured a lot of brown cameos and lots of, you know, customization that was more aimed towards open woodland, whereas the Axis and Nazi setup appears to be much more black related. There seems to be a lot more darker colors, as you would anticipate from their uniforms at the town. Now we have the towing vehicle mechanic, which I think is pretty damn cool. This is something that alongside we've seen with these bunkers being built here, appears to be a tactical thing. You'll be able to tow these flat cannons around the map to do damage and potentially prevent players from dropping in around certain areas and parachuting in around certain areas, which I think is pretty cool. And it will be able to be transported by various different vehicles. We also have the opening instances of a new animation system here, as we've seen with the new movement system here, with a player actually clambering through the window. And it does appear he's actually jumped from the building to his left over into the window on his right and is climbing through it using a slower animation. You'll also be able to jump out of windows in the game and land on the story below with a little bit of a combat roll, so it's interesting to see how so many different mechanics are being added to the game. We also have a bolt action sniper with an optical sight here that appears to be of the 8 to 12 times variety, maybe even the 20 times variety if it's looking even longer. I don't really know exactly what weapon this is. It could be anything from a Lee Enfield to, you know, a Gewehr, but I don't really want to speculate on that because, quite frankly, that's not something I have in my locker in terms of historical accuracy of weapons, and of course all of these things are subject to change before the game releases. We have our first instance of the first-person tank perspective here, which is crazy as hell, might I add. Alongside this actual towing of the flat cannon whilst it's being towed by an armoured car, which appears to feature machine guns on the back of it. As you can see, there's potentially a troop transport vehicle, an armoured troop transport vehicle, towing the flat cannon, which can indeed be fired whilst it's being towed around. But interestingly as well, something I've noticed here is that these vehicles are actually leaving tyre trails in the ground, which I think is pretty cool as an immersive factor. But the first-person tank perspective is incredible. We're seeing the customization options here actually appearing on the very front of the tank, with some of the foliage that you can add as a customization option is officially up front. You can actually see it in the first-person perspective of the vehicle, which I think is a neat little touch. And I think it's really cool to see these cannons and tanks be considered deadly force, because that thing, quite frankly, just ripped down an entire building. So if we scroll back just a touch here, we're seeing some of the first instances of more immersive factors in the game. This character here has been wiped out backwards with a new Ragdoll effect, which is something which is most definitely featuring with the new animation system. This character laying down as well is also laying on his back, which is something available in-game. And we're seeing the explosive shockwave here as well, doing damage to the sort of local proximity and taking out lots of wood, but also this will knock players on their ass, which I think is pretty damn cool. Alright, now I'm going to drag this back, starting in and around here, because there is a lot to digest. So, to start off with here, we're having our first look at the flight system in the game. In terms of aerial combat, this is going to be a really important time for Battlefield players, because World War II is renowned for some of the most, authentic and crazy improvements in aerial combat in modern history. And we're seeing our first customization options, as well as the in-flight, in-cockpit view, which is something that featured in Battlefield 1 and I'm sure is featured in many other Battlefields as well, and will definitely be back for Battlefield 5. You'll be able to look around on the inside of your cockpit. We're seeing the end of the tail is customizable with some kind of options in terms of visuals. We're seeing that the wings are customizable with visuals. There's even numbers on the side of the planes, which I think is pretty neat. And then as we move along, we have the first-person perspective of the bombing sequence. So if you're actually, moving in to drop a bomb on enemy infantry or potentially a vehicle, that's a really clean sight, and I think it's much better than some of the stuff we've seen before. It's very authentic and looks pretty damn badass if you ask me. And we're seeing the explosive shockwave result on the infantry players below, who have all been dropped to the ground as a result of this bomb dropping. Now, as we move along here in this opening scene, we have downed soldiers. Now, Battlefield 5 is featuring both dead soldiers and downed soldiers. Downed soldiers are capable of being revived by squad mates, faster revived by medics, and medics can revive all teammates, not just squad mates, but they're not completely dead. This guy here is definitely alive. The perspective you're seeing as it looks at the planes is definitely alive as well. And you can see this man to the left of us here is actually dragging away bodies, which is something that you can now do in Battlefield 5 multiplayer, which I think is really tight. It's something I've wanted to see since the days of Battlefield 3 in the opening trailer sequence in single player, where that dude gets shot by the sniper rifle and gets dragged away by his teammates. I think that's pretty dope. Another look inside at the potential cockpits and aerial views. So we have more customization options here. We're seeing camo patterns. We're seeing different colors on the tail and on the front with yellows. We're seeing them chase a British plane, which features the RAF logo back in the days, the historically one. And we have the Axis logos on the side of the wings here. And this is something that interests me. If the pilot class does indeed remain a class, if this is all customization options or things that are applied automatically. Automatically, you get a certain uniform in Battlefield 1 when you are a pilot, but it'll be really cool to see if you can actually change some of those aspects, because it looks like this dude here is kitted up with all kinds of goggles and aerial things that are intense. We have, you know, it's going to be an intense level of customization for pilots. If that is indeed a thing, we shall see. Now, moving along here as we fly over, I think what's really cool here is we actually have a brown plane being chased by a silver and black plane, which are both pursuing, by the looks of things, a British plane, because they both appear to be Axis related. So a hell of a lot of customization options off the bat. And as we move into the last sequence here, we have a nose decal. This is an actual full-blown nose decal that you can add, and it looks like that's also going to be a customization option alongside all the crazy stuff that we've already seen. So, that's about it for the reveal trailer, and there is of course this small sequence at the end related to one of the war stories, which is graphically pretty insane, if I may say so. But other than that, it looks like Battlefield 5 is shaping up really cool. There's a lot in the trailer that has a lot of promise in terms of customization, in terms of the way the game's looking, in terms of the feedback and mechanics. It's looking great, and you know, from things as simple as climbing through a window to being able to build things to the graphic impressiveness of, you know, planes coming down, the Aurora Borealis, and the immersive aspects. I'm really excited to see what Battlefield 5 has to offer. So guys, that's it from me today, the Tactical Brit. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again soon in another video.